Here's an article along the same vein that says fat builds up in the hearts even before you become diabetic. So if you become diabetic, fat was already building up in the heart, in the blood vessels of the heart, years before you actually became diabetic. Well, if diabetes runs in the family, and I don't mean this critically or negatively, you can view yourself more or less as a diabetic. If your good cholesterol is low, you should sort of view yourself as a type of diabetic. If your triglycerides are high, you should sort of view yourself as a type of diabetic. But even at that, diabetes is generally at over 90% related to percent body fat. Now, I have an article in here about A1C. A1C is a measure, it's a blood test, that tells you how much of the time your sugar was at a certain level. And an A1C of less than 5.5 is pretty safe for an adult. An adult 35, 40, 45, 50. But I must say this, I don't like to see an A1C as high as 5.5 in somebody in their 20s or their early 30s. As a matter of fact, what I say is an A1C of 5.5, get that number 5.5, is good for someone at 55. So above that, you want to, like the low good cholesterol, the low HDL, like the high triglycerides, you want to start to view yourself as essentially a diabetic, which means you're moving yourself towards all the problems with regard to blindness, with regard to open heart surgery, heart attack, angioplasty, stroke, dialysis, et cetera, et cetera. The higher that sugar, the higher that A1C, think of sugar in the blood as heat. And you're overheating your tissues and burning them out. Our tissues are just like our lungs and heart. It's supposed to have a certain amount of heat in there. And when that sugar is higher, you're actually starting to cook those tissues and move yourself in the direction of heart failure, dialysis, blindness, and so on. And I don't mean to be a downer or negative. This is optimistic. Forewarned is forearmed. You can learn what I say. You can begin to do it on your own. And as I've said many times, we have a website. Go to our website, www.thepmc, the Preventive Medicine Center. Or go to Google and just put in Preventive Medicine Center. Or go to Google and put in H. Robert Silverstein, MD. And you will work your way through and find our website with all this health education information on it, with recipes on it. I even think there are some diets for the purpose of weight loss, but that's just for your education. If you do have questions, like I say, give me a call. Here's an article from the New England Journal. Now, this is August 3rd of 2007. This talks about the missing link, lose weight, live longer. And right behind that, I have another article that says health benefits seen with greater leanness in normal weight adults. And what that means is, okay, let's say you are actually not so heavy. But it turns out that if you're even thinner, you live longer. Then I have a whole bunch of information here on skipping eating every other day. One study did that and showed that it immensely improved the chemicals that we measure that are a function of aging. Well, I want to shift gears for a moment now and talk about vitamin D. Vitamin D is being discussed everywhere. If you remember 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even longer, I started discussing vitamin D. I want to make it real clear. Your 25 vitamin D level should be close to 80. Do not pay attention to these new studies that say 30 is okay. It turns out it's just like the reverse of blood pressure, where the higher your blood pressure, the worse your risk. It turns out that the higher your vitamin D level, the lower your risk for multiple sclerosis, the lower your risk for diabetes, the lower your risk for cancer of the breast and colon, the lower your risk of heart disease. And so you have to be careful how you interpret that information. If your vitamin D level is naturally very high, that probably means you were outside a great deal. And if you were outside a great deal, you were probably at the beach and swimming or playing volleyball, or maybe you play tennis and you've been in the sun. So you've got to be careful. It's not just the vitamin D. It may be ideas that go along with it, which are not worked out into the statistical equations. But I want to tell you that vitamin D is becoming more and more recognized. I was about to say important. It's not more and more important. It's always been important. But it's now being recognized as an important risk factor. Eating red meat may raise breast cancer risk. And it turns out in another study that I have here, eating red meat for women while pregnant reduces the fertility of male offspring. In other words, if a woman is pregnant and has a baby inside, then if she eats red meat, that male is less likely to have good fertility. And let's see here.